So I recently visited my hometown back in Chickasha, Oklahoma. It's where I went to junior high, high school, and college. We had to go back there and close on some rental property. And so I was visiting family, went past the old house I used to live in, reminiscing, reflecting, drove past the old little grocery store I used to work in high school, et cetera. I was thinking about how my people skills were shaped from those experiences and kind of where I grew up. What happened was we drove past this old grocery store that I used to work in high school. It was a little like convenience store, little tiny neighborhood convenience store back in the early 80s. And it was on the poor side of town, which is where I lived for a large part of that period with my mom, who was single at the time. I drove past this old rundown store. The building is almost condemned now, but we drove past and I was thinking about just everything I learned back then and how I was able in school to sit at really any table in the cafeteria, any group, sit with any group, right? And we all have our groups, and not just, I'm not talking about racial groups or ethnicity groups like necessarily. Let's set that aside. I'm talking about groups like we had the jocks, we had the do-gooders. Okay, those are the rich kids. We had the thugs. Okay, and then we had what I would call a fourth group, which would be kind of your general purpose, your Heinz 57, your miscellaneous group, who didn't really fit in anywhere. So those are the four groups. I definitely was in the Heinz 57. And the reason for that is because of this. I played sports, but I wasn't like a super good athlete. So I did know the jocks, hung out with them a little bit. I could fit in with that crowd when I needed to. I lived on the poor side of town with my single mom. So I worked in the little convenience store, and that's where all the thugs lived, or the poor kids. As the poor kids were called the thugs back then. This is early 80s. This is not what I named them. I'm just telling you what we called them. Okay. So I knew all the thugs because they came into the store. So they all knew me. I knew them. And I lived on that side of town. So I was kind of one of them, right? A little bit. However, my mom and dad were divorced. My dad had a little bit of money. So I always drove a nice car. I always had nice clothes. I always had material things. I always had cash, so to speak, because I worked at the convenience store, and plus I had my dad. So I could also hang out with the do-gooders when I needed to, the rich kids. And then my friends, my closest friends, were the general purpose kids or the miscellaneous kids who kind of fit in anywhere. And so I knew all them. And so I was always able to navigate throughout high school. I just could be in any group. If the do-gooders were having a party, I could go. If the thug kids on the poor side of town were having a gang fight, no, I'm just joking. If they were having to get together, I could go. I could really just hang out anywhere. I could just float anywhere, right? That shaped me. That really shaped me and helped my ability to understand different types of personalities and style, communicate with different types of groups. And I thought about all that as I was reflecting and driving around town this last week when we were back in Oklahoma. What is my point, and how does this tie into the Riderflex show and our tips around career advice or job interviewing? What's my point? My point is this. First of all, if you have children, I recommend that you push them to hang around different groups and don't let them get, cornered into one group. Okay, I'm not here to give parenting advice, but I thought I'd throw that in there. But from a career perspective, I really encourage you to try and be a part of as many different types of meetings or groups or silos within your company as possible. Try to mix it up. Okay. If you're in IT, go to lunch with some marketing people. Okay. If you're in sales, go to lunch with some finance people. Try to work the room, so to speak, and be able to communicate with all the different groups and so forth within whatever organization you're in. And it will help you. It'll help you get things done. It'll help you communicate better with different groups, et cetera. And you'll be more successful, and you'll probably move up and have more opportunities in your career as things move along. there is your Riderflex tip of the day.